So thank you so much for doing this today, Kurt. It's such a pleasure to do this with you.
No problem, man. Well, we were chatting and there a few months ago, and and it just dawned on me, like I'm interested in your story, and I don't know if you've had the chance to talk about your story because you're always the interviewer, right?
I
So,
am.
so today you can be the interviewee, and if you want to just dive right in.
Sure, yeah. And I've done
Okay.
like over 200 interviews, so it's the first time getting interviewed, which is super cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think your story is really interesting and important too. And so, if we're talking about the Canadian tattoo scene project you're doing, I think definitely you're a part of that, like a huge part of that. So, you know, I don't think it would be complete with your story missing. So now's our opportunity to put it in there. Um, so I guess diving right in, I got a list of questions here. Um, in the beginning of your tattoo career, what inspired you to pursue tattooing as a career,
Well,
or what got you interested in tattooing in general?
it was definitely my father and his friends. My dad was a biker, so there was like always bikers around. My mom was a biker when I was younger, and he had the Easy Rider magazines. So, I started seeing tattoos and those little leaflets they put in. And
Mhm.
yeah, so that just kind of got me excited about tattooing, and I was seeing it on my dad and his friends. And I was drawn to it. Like
Mhm.
super drawn to tattoos. And I didn't know why, but I had this fascination and a curiosity about them.
And so you were quite young then when you got exposed to tattooing. Then like you were like basically a kid growing up looking at Easy Riders. I can relate, by the way.
Yeah.
That's how I got into tattooing too. Reading those old biker magazines. And yeah, it just seemed like such a cool thing. Tattoos and the characters that were involved seemed like such interesting, colorful characters.
Well, exactly. And well, my dad's friends were interesting and colorful, and they had tattoos.
Yeah. And so
So,
what led you to tattooing actually? Like, how old were you when you did your first tattoo?
well, this is kind of interesting, and I was 10 years old when I did my very first tattoo, which is pretty young. I don't think I've other than there was the Clement Demir's family. One of the Demirs tattooed his brother in the tattoo shop, I think before the age 10, but I've never heard anyone starting at 10 years old. But it was hand poking, right? My
Yeah.
childhood best friend had given me a tattoo magazine, and I just I was it was like I was holding gold, and I couldn't, like, day and night I'd be leafing through that magazine, studying every single piece, not knowing why I was so drawn to tattoos. But it was just I was so drawn to it that I got a needle, wrapped some thread around it, some Indian ink, and started tattooing myself. And then I continued the tattoo myself and friends,
Mhm.
all through my childhood. S- So it was pretty early on for me.
Yeah. And so that those first sort of like homemade tattoos, I guess that lead to in I guess well ultimately it must have led to an interest in tattooing professionally.
Mhm.
Who was the one who took you, like, did somebody take you under your wing and teach you how to tattoo at some point, like
Yeah,
outside of the homemade tattooing?
eventually. Well, when I was 17, I was still doing homemade tattoos, and or I was 16, I think. And then I my one of my father's friends wanted this Scooby Doo tattoo, and I said I could do it. And I was at a house party with my parents. He's like, okay. So I ran home and got my little tattoo kit and tattooed this Scooby Doo on my dad's friend in front of my parents. Now they knew that I was doing tattooing myself because they could see them on me. And then
Yeah.
one of my friends, his mother dragged him by the ear to my parents' door, and you know got my dad out there and he said, "Look what your son did to my son." And my dad says, "Well, put a fucking leash on your kid."
That's cool. Your dad had your back.
He did. He did. He had my back totally, which
Yeah.
is hilarious. But, because most parents, you'd be in a lot of trouble for tattooing your friends, right? Or they'd be disappointed. So anyways, after my father watched me do this homemade tattoo, he said, you have a tax return coming from a factory you worked in as a student. Why don't we take you and get you all the supplies you need? So one of my dad's friends had told me where I could go get tattoo equipment. So I went to Wayne and Joan at Panther Products in Dutton and picked up a starter kit. Not having a clue about any of this stuff, right? But it was such a, you talk about pinnacle moments. That was a pinnacle moment for me, riding in my parents' vehicle with this box of tattoo gear on my lap. It was like my whole future was sitting in my lap, and I did have a sense of the gravity of what I was bringing home that day. And
I picture the briefcase from Pulp Fiction, where you open the box and just light comes out.
Oh yeah,
like, we're good.
For me, it was glowing. It absolutely was glowing. But so after I fumbled around with the tattooing, and my dad helped me learn how to make needles. He didn't know how, but he was a creative genius. And so he helped me. We figured out how to make needles. And then after about a year in, I got a lucky break. Paul Vickery, who's since passed, just recently passed. He was from Guelph, and he let me come and tattoo at the convention, and it was such a landslide that I was there. But that's a whole nother story. But through that convention, I got to meet. Wiry knew Mike Austin. He was sort of in my peripheral, and I had a small tattoo by him. And then I got to meet Mac Bragg, and after that show, I ended up landing a job in Toronto tattooing at Dancing Dragon, but it didn't really work out. And Timothy Hannock, who owned the shop, wasn't really forthcoming with all the details of how that was going to go down. So I ended up having to quit that shop, move back to Ingersoll, and go back to this factory I was working in. And when Mike found out what had happened, because I'd quit my factory job to go tattoo at the shop in Toronto, he really felt bad for me. He said, "Yeah, he should have told you the little more of the details on that, and I would have warned you not to do that." And so he called up Mac Bragg. I don't know if you know Mac, but
I met him a long, long time ago. Yeah, I have a machine from him actually.
Okay.
I always wanted a Mac Bragg machine, and I got a really cool machine from him. So
yeah,
but I haven't seen him in years.
No, he's not tattooing, and he was tuning machines for Icon. And maybe he still goes in the odd time and tunes up the machines, all the green monsters before they head out. But so Mike felt bad, and he called Mac, and he had asked him to build me some machines. Mike and Mac set me up with National Tattoo Supply to buy some Jonesy kits. Mike set me up with Mickey Sharps. And back then, as when I called Mickey Sharps up, he's like, "What do you want?"
Yeah, how'd you get this number?
Basically. So I said, Mike Austin gave me his customer number and said he would vouch for me. What's his customer number? And I gave him Mike's customer number, and he says, "I'll call you back in 2 weeks." Click. But
2 weeks.
Yeah, it took 2 weeks. So, but he called Mike to make sure that I hadn't stolen his customer number or something.
Right. Yeah.
But so
they were really particular who they did business with back then. The supply houses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember doing that with I remember having to get to buy stuff from National. I remember having to get signatures from 2 people who were either longtime customers or members of the National Tattoo Association. And I
Yep.
got Dan Alliston and John Cook wrote me a note
Okay.
saying that it was okay if they sell stuff to me. And without that, they wouldn't have even spoken to me on the phone or nothing, right?
Well, yeah, the same. Mac and Kathy and Mike Austin helped me, get into national as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to Kingston and Mac made me buy one of Dave Long's power packs. He said, if you're going to run a machine by me, you need a good power supply. You need good inks. And so that's why they had set me up. And so that was the beginning of a very long friendship with Mac Bragg. And I spent many, many weekends at Mac's place in his little sub room. He would share so much stuff that I felt like, don't even tell me one more thing because my head's going to explode. And but it was like, I really felt like I was starting to get a grasp of the basics of tattooing. I never had an apprenticeship, but between Mac and Mike and a few others, that's how I learned how to tattoo. I'm still learning because it changes, right? It's just constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier that your dad helped you make needles and stuff. Like, was your dad into tattooing? Like, did he tattoo, or did he have a lot of tattoos?
No, but he was a master fabricator, and he could just figure anything out. He was a pretty gifted guy, and I've always said that if I was half as talented or creative as my father, I'd be successful in life. So he just looked at the pre-made needles that we had and figured it out.
It's just innovative, like that.
Yeah.
I remember my first real tattoo machine that I had. One time I broke the spring on it, and I was just like, "Oh, what do I do? What do I do?" And my dad, same thing. He took the broken spring to work, and he found a piece of sheet metal, just a piece of scrap metal, and made a spring out of that. He's like, "There you go." And I'm pretty sure that spring's still on that machine.
Really?
It worked great, and he didn't know anything about it. He's like, "Here you go."
Yeah.
It worked. Sometimes innovation, it crosses over. It doesn't have to be just from the world of tattooing. Like, innovation is innovation, I guess.
Yeah, and necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's cool. So you end up hooking up with Mike Austin and Mac Bragg and all these guys, and Mac basically took you under his wing, I guess, and
yeah,
I would say he kind of showed you the way.
He did. He explained all the the basic mechanics of application and sterility. And the interesting thing about Mac is that he put a microscope on just about everything. Because we use Vaseline, he would give you the whole history of Vaseline and where it came from, and he had such a curious mind and an intelligence. He was extremely intelligent. So, getting to learn some of the basic mechanics from Mac was really awesome. And I feel like it set me apart from a lot of others, and understanding how the inks were made, and, the basic mechanics and the histories of tattooing, the history of power units, and, just...
Well, I think all that stuff is really so important to know, instead of just having to, something breaks, you buy a new one, you ran out of this, just go buy one, buy. It's like we made, fixed.
That's right.
Like, I don't have money to buy a new thing. I'm just gonna fix the old one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 15...
when would this have been? Like, what, like, was it in the 90s, 80s?
So
when was this?
It was 93 when I started with the proper tattoo machines
with Mac.
With Mac, yeah.
Or when you went to get the golden box of tattoo gear.
Yeah, that's what it was. So 93 when I got my machines, and then 85 when I did my first official tattoo, unofficial,
Yeah, yeah.
but it counts. I was marking the skin,
Oh
and
yeah, it counts. A tattoo's a tattoo. Like you know, people people climb the mountain in the Philippines to get tattooed by that old woman tattooer, and she does 4 little dots on you by hand. That's a tattoo, right?
yeah,
Right. I mean,
absolutely.
there's a huge tradition there that makes it a lot more special than some kid in in his bedroom doing a homemade tattoo, but it's still a tattoo.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
When I
it's a
interview
mark of the skin,
people,
and it has a story, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I know when I interview people, when I find out when they did their first homemade one, I put that as their start date.
yeah,
Maybe it's not electric tattooing, but it's a tattoo. So,
yeah, and we all had to start somewhere.
mhm. I'm kind of
Back then,
proud.
I think
I'm
that
proud
was
of my
more
start.
common. Like in the 80s and 90s, I know artists that I've met over the years that started around that time. A lot of them have a story like this. Like they started out just
Mhm.
tattooing their buddies, homemade tattoos, and it's almost like I think because like it wasn't as popular or prevalent then. Like tattooing was really kind of I wouldn't say underground, but it was like a close knit thing that you couldn't get in easily, right? And you know, if you were an excited teenager and you wanted to make a tattoo, you'd just be like you said, the mother, necessity is the mother of invention, right? You just like figure it out. Oh, how can I make a tattoo? Well, take a needle and some ink, and there you go, tattoo,
Yeah.
right? So nowadays, I guess with so much exposure to where to get gear and where to and the fact that supply houses will sell gear to a lot of people, and with all the information on the internet, it's definitely a different world. I think. Would you agree?
Well, it's 100%, and it's interesting when someone of our generation or before us has a little bit of hold back, or we're keeping some things close to our hearts. We're called gatekeepers, but if you go back to the generation before us, those guys were gatekeepers. It
Oh yeah,
was.
they were like the armored car keepers, and they
Yeah.
weren't letting you in. It was more than a gate. You couldn't even look through the gate. No, no, no. You know.
Yeah, they were
Oh yeah, you had to earn the key for the
Mhm.
gate, right? I still think it's good to earn your keep.
But and I think what makes it different today is that the tradition, the tattooers years ago were upholding this tradition of tattooing, and they conversed with each other, and there was something really honorable and about becoming a tattoo artist. It was a badge of honor, and they were protecting that history and the lineage
Absolutely.
that
Well, like
came.
Mickey Sharp's phoning Mike Austin to make sure you weren't some guy that just scooped his customer number,
Yeah,
right? Like he went, he's going out of his way to like possibly not get your business,
yeah, yeah.
right? Because he wanted to protect tattooing.
Yeah, well, that's the integrity that was prevalent in our time.
Mhm. What would you say were some of the influences you had early on in tattooing? Like, were there certain artists that you looked up to other than Mac and Mike Austin and people like that? Were there, you read the Easy Rider tattoo magazines and stuff like that? Who did you look up to in tattooing back then?
Yeah, I remember, certain names would come up. Mario Barth was one, and when Guy Aitchison was just coming onto the scene, his stuff
Hmm.
was a little goofy at first, but way better than I could ever draw. And then it progressed so quickly to see what he was doing in such a short period of time. It's like that was really fascinating. Aaron Kane, and you were definitely somebody that I was looking at, years ago, and tracking your career as well.
Oh, thank you.
I've always had I've had a deeper fascination with Canadian tattooers.
Hmm.
I remember hearing stories about Lanny Glover, never had met him, and
Hmm.
I was in Toronto, at a friend's shop, and I saw one of his tattoos, and like my eyes were melting. Like I just,
Yeah.
this is the mysterious Lanny Glover. Like, look at this
Hmm.
tattoo. It was vibrant, and yeah, it was mind blowing to see one of his tattoos. And then Bill Baker, like, so I've always had such a curiosity for Canadian tattooers, and I'm not sure where that comes from, but I guess I love Canada. I think we have
Well,
some.
also, I guess you being in Ontario, you might like. Well, I guess I don't know if Bill Baker was in Ontario back then, was he? Because he came from the West Coast originally, I think. But I know Lanny is in Ontario.
Mm.
Like, I wonder if it being close to you, if and Mike Austin and people like that, I wonder if it was just that was the tattoos that were around you and you were exposed to that kind of work. Would you say?
Yeah, like the exposure was limited, but
Mhm.
but yeah, like I remember hearing Mike talk about some of the tattoo artists, and so because if he was talking about them, I was interested in those people. And
Mhm.
Baker was in Ontario. I think it was 91 or 92, something like that.
It's so crazy thinking about how tattooing is now. It's so huge and so popular. It's such a phenomenal thing where so many people are getting involved. So many phenomenal artists. I wonder they don't really know a world. I'm talking about the younger generation of tattooing. I don't think they really know the world where like tattooing was still illegal in
Hmm.
a lot of places, right? Like I remember when I wasn't tattooing when it was illegal in Manitoba yet, but I remember hearing about it, and I remember when it was still illegal in Massachusetts and in New York and in
Hmm.
Oklahoma, and I can't remember which other states, but and even other parts of the world. Like, I think didn't tattooing just technically become legal in Japan like a few years ago?
Hmm.
Like there's, it's an interesting thought to see how far it's come from that.
Well, in not only the legality aspects of that, but it was also extremely socially unacceptable to
Hmm.
get tattoos. And I remember early on when I'd go into a store, like the clerks would follow me around constantly asking me, "Can I help you? Can I help you?" And
Yeah.
you were, I don't know how many times people would ask me, "What are you going to do when you get older? You've got all these tattoos. What are you going to do?"
I remember people asking that too, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. So I would play with them. I'd say, "Well, can I get it off? Can I get them off?" And they'd say, "No, you're screwed."
Like, oh man,
Oh, I never
really?
thought about that.
That guy lied to me. He told me they'd just come off eventually. So, that said, like when you started tattooing, it was kind of a different world too. What were some of the struggles that you may have had coming up in tattooing?
Well, initially, I didn't know how to tattoo, and I'm still
Yeah.
learning. And I didn't know how to draw, and I'm still learning. I wasn't an artist coming into tattooing. I was in the era where I had flash books, and I was just doing the flash, and I was happy doing those. Anything anybody wanted, long within limits, I would tattoo
Mm.
if it was in my books. But I learned early on that if I was going to have a spot, that I would have to learn how to draw. So it was a massive hurdle, and I'm still working at it. Like I say, like I think we're all working at it.
Absolutely.
And then not have, I was in a small town years ago. People often worked in the cities because you needed that client pool to draw from, and I was in a small town, so it was a slow burn to get work. And I remember being very creative and clever in the way that I was promoting myself and my business. And I would make flyers and put them on telephone poles in other towns, and anywhere where people would go, I'd have like a poster with all the little tabs. You pull the phone number, and
We still have one of those. We put those up. They work.
Yeah, absolutely. When I had a shop and employees, if the employees were starting to get slow, I'd say, okay, go get the flyers, and I'd have like 2,000 to 3,000 flyers in the back room just waiting for slow days, and they would each grab a handful and drive to a different city in town.
Yeah,
just pepper vehicles and parking lots. And
why not? Hey, you know what? If it gets you 2 or 3 people, it's worth it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But even though it was a struggle to get busy enough, and I was working in a factory for the first 10 years of my career, and I didn't take a holiday for the first 10 years of my career. I worked 365 days a year pretty much. I'd work till I got extremely burned out, and then I'd crash for a couple of days, but then right back at it. But I was dedicated, and I had a lot of drive. And getting to do a tattoo was so incredibly special to me. Those first 10 years of jobs, like, I'd just be waiting at the door for clients to come, and grateful for everyone that did.
Yeah, and I get the feeling it's still like that for you.
Yeah. I get really excited.
People call, I'm like, oh yeah, what do you want? Yeah.
And you build up some friendships with people that come and get work with you, and they become very close. And I love that. I love that I'm tattooing grandchildren now of some of my early clients.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
We have across the street from our shop, there's an elementary school, and now once in a while I get customers. They're like, yeah, I went to like kindergarten across the street here, and we all looked up across and could see the neon sign from your shop, and and they were all like, oh, someday I'm gonna go to that tattoo shop. And now years later, the kids that were kids then are coming to get tattooed.
I know, right? That's such a cool thing.
And what would you say are some of the pinnacle moments in your tattoo career? Like, so what are some things that stand out in your mind?
Getting to meet Mac and have Mike's support, that was really monumental to me. It felt incredibly special to sit there and learn how to build tattoo machines and hear the stories of the old timers. Because I met Mac and Mike, I got to do a guest spot at Jerry Swallow's shop in '98, and that was incredibly special. And he put a big tattoo on the side of my leg. I almost died. It was 9.5 hours. And then getting to do a guest spot at the Dutchman Tattoo, I really felt like I wasn't anywhere in the league of all those tattooers in there in the Dutchman, but somehow, some way, it happened, and I was invited to come and be there. So, just pretty amazing.
That's incredible. And so, I guess that's a good segue to talking about your project. You're working on a set of books about the Canadian tattoo scene.
Come back tomorrow for part 2. Kurt and I talk about the Canadian electric tattoo scene book. He gave me the opportunity to tell some stories about my travels and how the project got started, which I've never shared publicly before. I hope you enjoyed the first half of this interview, and thanks for watching.